I still remember that February evening like it was yesterday, even though it's been 9 years since it happened. I was 16, a junior at Lincoln Park High School in Chicago, and I thought I knew what family meant. I thought I understood my place in our perfectly manicured suburban home on the North Shore. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. The snow was falling heavily outside our floor-to-ceiling windows, creating a blanket of white across our neighborhood. Inside, our house buzzed with the familiar pre-event energy that I'd grown accustomed to over the years. My mother, Catherine, was upstairs in her walk-in closet, deliberating between 2 designer gowns for what she called the social event of the season, a charity concert at the Chicago Symphony Center, featuring some world-renowned violinist whose name I couldn't pronounce. "Nick, honey, can you come up here for a moment?" my mother called from her bedroom. Her voice carried that particular tone she used when she needed something, but was trying to sound casual about it. I dragged myself up the marble staircase, my hand sliding along the cold banister. Something felt off in my stomach, a dull, persistent ache that had been bothering me since lunch. I'd chalked it up to the cafeteria's questionable meatloaf, but it was getting harder to ignore. "Which one do you think?" Mom stood before her mirror, holding up a midnight blue Vera Wang against her frame, then switching to a burgundy Oscar de la Renta. At 45, she still turned heads at every social gathering, her blonde hair always perfectly styled, her figure maintained through twice-weekly sessions with her personal trainer. "The blue one," I said, pressing my hand against my lower right side where the ache seemed to be concentrating. "It brings out your eyes." She smiled at me in the mirror. "You have such good taste, sweetheart. Just like your old mom." She hung the burgundy dress back in the closet and began laying out her jewelry. "Your father's beside himself with excitement. This violinist, Dimitri something, apparently he's performed for royalty. The Hendersons managed to get us box seats, and Dad thinks half the partners from his firm will be there." I nodded, trying to focus on her words, but the pain was becoming more insistent. It felt like someone was slowly twisting a knife in my abdomen. "Are you feeling all right, honey? You look a little pale." Mom glanced at me while fastening a diamond necklace around her neck. "Just a stomach ache," I said, not wanting to make a big deal out of it. "Probably something I ate." "Oh, you and your sensitive stomach," she laughed. "Remember when you were little and you'd get nervous before school presentations? You'd always complain about stomach pains." She turned back to her reflection, applying the final touches of her makeup. "Maybe take some Pepto-Bismol before bed." Dad appeared in the doorway, adjusting his bow tie. Richard Montenegro, always Richard, never Rich or Dick, was the kind of man who commanded attention when he entered a room. At 52, he still had the build of the college football player he'd once been, though his dark hair was now silver at the temples. His custom-tailored tuxedo fit him perfectly, and he wore it with the confidence of someone who belonged at high society events. "Ladies, we need to leave in 15 minutes, he announced, checking his Rolex. "Traffic's going to be murder with this snow, and I promised Henderson we'd meet for drinks before the performance." "Almost ready, darling," Mom said, slipping into her heels. "Nick was just helping me choose the right dress." Dad smiled at me, one of his rare, genuine smiles. "What would your mother do without you, kiddo?" He ruffled my hair affectionately. "You sure you're okay staying home tonight? Mrs. Patterson next door said she could check on you if you needed anything." "I'm fine, Dad. Really." I forced a smile, even though the pain was now accompanied by a wave of nausea. "Have fun at your fancy concert." "We will," he said, already mentally shifting into business mode. This could be a really important evening for the firm. The Hendersons have been talking to Goldman & Associates about switching their corporate accounts, and if we play our cards right tonight... His voice trailed off as Mom emerged from her closet, looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. The blue dress hugged her figure perfectly, and the diamonds at her throat caught the light from the chandelier. "Stunning," Dad said, offering her his arm. "Absolutely stunning. They made a beautiful couple, I had to admit. The kind of couple that graced the society pages of the Chicago Tribune and made other people wish they had their life." As I watched them together, preparing for another evening in their glittering social world, the pain in my side gave another sharp twist. "I think I'm going to lie down," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. "Good idea, sweetheart," Mom said, kissing my forehead. "Get some rest. We'll probably be late. You know how these things go. Don't wait up for us." They gathered their coats and headed downstairs, their voices fading as they moved through the house. I heard the garage door open and close, then the sound of Dad's BMW pulling out of the driveway. And then I was alone in our big, empty house, with only the sound of snow against the windows and the growing certainty that this wasn't just a stomach ache. I had no idea that this night would change everything, that it would teach me the difference between having parents and having family, between being heard and being listened to. All I knew was that something was very wrong, and for the first time in my life, I was going to have to figure out what to do about it all by myself. The pain hit me like a lightning bolt about 20 minutes after my parents left. I was sprawled on the leather couch in our living room, trying to watch some mindless reality show on our massive flat-screen TV, when it felt like someone had just stabbed me with a red-hot poker. I doubled over, gasping, my hands clutching my right side. "Oh, God," I whispered to the empty room, sweat beading on my forehead despite the house's perfect climate control. This wasn't a stomach ache anymore. This was something else entirely. I tried to breathe through it, the way my old soccer coach had taught us to handle cramps during practice. In through the nose, out through the mouth, but each breath seemed to make the pain worse, radiating from my lower right abdomen up into my chest and down into my hip. My phone was upstairs in my bedroom, but I didn't think I could make it up the stairs. The house phone was in the kitchen, mounted on the wall next to the refrigerator. I half-crawled, half-stumbled across the hardwood floors, my sock-covered feet slipping on the polished surface. The kitchen felt cavernous and cold, all stainless steel and granite countertops that Mom had spent months selecting. I reached for the phone with shaking hands and dialed my parents' cell numbers. Dad first, straight to voicemail. His deep professional voice informed me that he was unavailable and would return my call as soon as possible. "Dad, it's Nick," I said after the beep, my voice cracking. "I'm really sick. The pain is getting worse, and I think I need to go to the hospital. Please call me back." Mom's phone rang 4 times before she answered. I could hear classical music and the murmur of conversation in the background. "Nick? Honey, what's wrong? We're just about to go in for the performance." "Mom, I'm in so much pain," I gasped, another wave of agony rolling through me. "It's not just a stomach ache. Something's really wrong. I think I need to go to the emergency room." There was a pause, and I could hear her moving away from the noise, her heels clicking on what sounded like marble floors. "Sweetheart, you were fine when we left. These things always seem worse when you're alone and anxious. Did you take the Pepto-Bismol I suggested?" "This isn't anxiety, Mom. Please, I'm scared. Can you come home?" I heard her sigh, and then my father's voice in the background asking what was wrong. She must have covered the phone because their voices became muffled, but I could make out fragments of their conversation, being dramatic. "Important evening. Probably just nerves." "Nick, honey, are you there?" Mom's voice came back, slightly strained. "Your father and I think you might be having a panic attack. You've been stressed about that chemistry test next week, and sometimes our bodies react to stress in physical ways." "I'm not having a panic attack," I nearly shouted, then immediately regretted it as the movement sent another spike of pain through my abdomen. "Mom, please. I've never felt anything like this before. I'm scared I'm going to pass out." "Listen to me, sweetheart." Her voice took on that patronizing tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "You're 16 years old. You have a tendency to dramatize things when you want attention. Remember when you convinced yourself you had appendicitis in 7th grade because you didn't want to take that math test? That had been different. I'd been 11 and genuinely confused about where my appendix was located. I'd pointed to my left side and claimed it hurt, which had been enough for the school nurse to send me home but not enough to fool the pediatrician. "This is different, Mom. I'm not making this up." "Of course you're not making it up, honey. I'm sure you do feel some discomfort. But this is a very important evening for your father and me. Do you understand? The Henderson account could mean a partnership for him. We've been planning this for months." I slumped against the kitchen counter, feeling dizzy and nauseous. Through the window, I could see the Pattersons' house next door, their warm yellow lights glowing through the falling snow. Mrs. Patterson had offered to check on me. "Maybe. Could you at least call Mrs. Patterson? Ask her to come over and—" "Absolutely not." Mom's voice was firm now. "I am not going to embarrass us by having the neighbors think we're the kind of parents who abandon our sick child. And I'm certainly not going to give Eleanor Patterson more ammunition for her gossip sessions." I could hear Dad's voice again, more urgent now, probably worried about missing their pre-show drinks. "Nick, I want you to go upstairs, take a hot bath, and get some rest. There's leftover soup in the refrigerator if you're hungry later. We'll be home around midnight, and if you're still feeling unwell in the morning, we'll call Dr. Morrison." "Mom, please. I love you, sweetheart, but I really need to go. The performance is about to start, and your father is giving me looks. You're going to be fine. You're a strong, smart girl, and you don't need us hovering over you every time you have a little discomfort." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, unable to believe what had just happened. They'd actually hung up on me. They'd chosen their concert over their daughter's pain. I tried calling back, but both phones went straight to voicemail. They'd probably turned them off for the performance. The pain was coming in waves now, each one worse than the last. I managed to stumble back to the living room, where I collapsed on the couch, pulling a throw pillow against my stomach. The movement made me cry out in pain, and I realized I was crying, not just from the physical agony, but from the crushing realization that I was completely alone. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing our perfect neighborhood in silence. Inside our perfect house, I curled up on our perfect couch and tried to figure out what to do next. My parents were at their perfect concert, networking with their perfect friends, and I was just the imperfect daughter who couldn't tell the difference between real pain and attention-seeking. But I knew this was real. I knew something was seriously wrong, and for the first time in my life, I was going to have to save myself. The clock on the mantel read 8:15 p.m. My parents wouldn't be home for hours. I had to make a decision, and I had to make it now before the pain got so bad that I couldn't think straight. I reached for my phone and started scrolling through my contacts, looking for someone, anyone, who might actually listen to me. I scrolled through my phone contacts with trembling fingers, the screen blurring as tears mixed with sweat dripped into my eyes. The pain was relentless now, coming in waves that left me gasping and unable to think clearly. I had to find someone who would take me seriously, someone who wouldn't dismiss me the way my parents had. My best friend Sarah was at her dad's house in Wisconsin for the weekend, a custody visit that happened every other weekend since her parents' divorce. My other close friends from school lived too far away, and none of them had cars anyway. Most of their parents barely knew me beyond polite conversations at school events. Then I remembered Mrs. Chen, my chemistry teacher. She'd always been kind to me, and she lived somewhere in our neighborhood. But I didn't have her personal number, and calling the school's emergency line seemed ridiculous for this situation. Another wave of pain hit me, and I literally saw stars. This wasn't normal teenage dramatics. This was something serious, something that required immediate medical attention. I knew it in my bones. The way you know when you're falling that you're going to hit the ground. I looked out the window at the Pattersons' house again. Mrs. Patterson had specifically offered to check on me. Mom had refused to call her because of neighborhood gossip, but Mom wasn't here. And if this was as serious as I thought it was, gossip would be the least of our problems. Forcing myself to stand took every ounce of willpower I had. The room spun around me, and I had to grip the back of the couch to keep from falling. I shuffled to the front door, grabbed my winter coat from the closet, and somehow managed to slip on my snow boots. The cold air hit me like a slap when I opened the door, but it actually felt good against my feverish skin. The walk across our yards, which normally took 30 seconds, felt like it took forever. Each step sent shockwaves through my abdomen, and I had to stop twice to double over and breathe through the pain. The snow was falling harder now, and my tracks were already being covered by the time I reached the Pattersons' front porch. I rang the doorbell and waited, praying they were home. Through the frosted glass panels beside their door, I could see warm light and movement. Please be home, please be home, please be home. The door opened to reveal Mrs. Patterson in her bathrobe and slippers, her gray hair in curlers. Her expression shifted from mild annoyance at being disturbed to genuine concern when she saw me. "Nick? Honey, what's wrong? You look terrible." "Mrs. Patterson, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm really sick and my parents are at a concert and I don't know what to do." The words tumbled out of me in a rush, and I realized I was crying again. "Oh my goodness, come in, come in." She ushered me into their warm entryway, her hands fluttering around me like a worried mother bird. Bob, come here!" Mr. Patterson appeared from their living room, still wearing his reading glasses and holding a newspaper. He was a retired firefighter, a big gentle man who'd lived in our neighborhood for 20 years. "What's going on, Eleanor?" "It's the Montenegro girl. She's sick. Look at her, Bob. She's pale as a sheet and shaking." I tried to explain what was happening, but another wave of pain hit me mid-sentence, and I doubled over, gasping. Mrs. Patterson's arm went around my shoulders immediately. "Where does it hurt, sweetheart?" "Here." I pointed to my lower right side. "It started as just a stomach ache, but now it's really bad. I think I need to go to the hospital." Mr. Patterson's expression grew serious. He knelt down beside me, his voice gentle but professional. "Nick, I've seen a lot of medical emergencies in my 30 years with the fire department. Can you try to walk for me?" I took a few steps and immediately felt nauseous. "It hurts worse when I move. Any fever?" Mrs. Patterson pressed the back of her hand to my forehead. "Yes, definitely. Bob, she's burning up." "Where are your parents?" Mr. Patterson asked. "At the Chicago Symphony Center, some charity concert. They said I was being dramatic and hung up on me." Admitting this out loud made me feel ashamed, like somehow their dismissal was my fault. The Pattersons exchanged a look that said more than words. Mrs. Patterson's jaw tightened, and Mr. Patterson shook his head slightly. "Well," Mrs. Patterson said firmly, "they're not here and you need medical attention. Bob, get the car keys." "I should call them first," I said weakly. "They'll be so angry if—" "Honey," Mrs. Patterson interrupted, helping me to their couch. "If your parents get angry at you for seeking medical help when you're in this much pain, then the problem isn't with you. It's with them." Mr. Patterson was already putting on his coat and boots. "Eleanor, you stay with Nick. I'll warm up the car and clear the snow off." Mrs. Patterson disappeared into their kitchen and returned with a glass of water and a small thermometer. "Under your tongue, sweetheart." After a minute, she checked it and frowned. 102.3. That's definitely a fever. Is that bad? Combined with the location of your pain and how you're walking? It could be your appendix, honey. That's not something to mess around with. Appendix. The word sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the fever. I remembered learning about appendicitis in health class, how it could rupture if left untreated, how people could die from it. Suddenly, my parents' dismissal felt not just hurtful, but dangerous. Mr. Patterson came back inside, stamping snow off his boots. "Car's ready. Eleanor, grab one of those plastic bowls just in case she gets sick on the way." As they helped me into my coat and guided me toward their car, Mrs. Patterson kept up a steady stream of reassuring chatter. "Don't you worry about anything, sweetheart. We're going to get you taken care of. Northwestern Memorial has an excellent emergency room. That's where we took Bob when he had his heart attack 3 years ago." I settled into the back seat of their Honda, grateful for the heated seats and the way Mr. Patterson drove slowly and carefully through the snowy streets. Every bump still sent pain shooting through me, but at least I wasn't alone anymore. At least someone was taking me seriously. "Should I try calling my parents again?" I asked as we turned onto Lakeshore Drive. "Not right now," Mrs. Patterson said gently from the front seat. "Let's focus on getting you to the hospital first. Once we know what we're dealing with, then we'll worry about reaching them." I leaned back against the headrest and closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the pain. Through the haze of fear and physical discomfort, I felt something I hadn't expected: gratitude. 2 people who barely knew me were dropping everything on a snowy Friday night to help me, while my own parents couldn't be bothered to leave their social event. Maybe this was what real family looked like. The emergency room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital was a blur of bright fluorescent lights and controlled chaos. Mr. Patterson helped me out of the car while Mrs. Patterson hurried ahead to speak with the triage nurse. I could barely walk upright, each step sending lightning bolts of pain through my entire right side. "We need help here," Mrs. Patterson called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone who wouldn't be ignored. "This young lady has severe abdominal pain and a high fever." A nurse with kind eyes and purple scrubs appeared with a wheelchair. "What's your name, honey?" "Nick Montenegro," I managed to gasp as she helped me into the chair. "And how old are you, Nick?" 16. "Where are your parents?" I looked up at Mrs. Patterson, feeling helpless and embarrassed. She stepped forward, her hand resting protectively on my shoulder. "Her parents are at an event downtown. We're neighbors. We brought her in because she was in severe pain and couldn't reach them." The nurse's expression didn't change, but I caught a slight tightening around her eyes. "Okay, let's get you checked in and see what's going on." The next 30 minutes were a whirlwind of questions, forms, and medical procedures. They took my temperature again, 102.8 now, and my blood pressure. A young resident with tired eyes examined me, pressing gently on my abdomen and asking me to rate my pain on a scale of 1 to 10. "It's about an 8, I said, gritting my teeth as he pressed on my lower right side. "Maybe a 9 when you do that. Classic McBurney's point tenderness," he murmured to the nurse, then looked at me with more attention. "Nick, I'm Dr. Martinez. Based on your symptoms and examination, I'm very concerned that you have appendicitis. We need to do some blood work and a CT scan to confirm, but I want to prepare you for the possibility that you'll need surgery tonight." The word surgery hit me like a physical blow. I'd never been in a hospital before, never had anything more serious than a broken wrist from falling off my bike when I was 12. Surgery meant cutting me open. It meant something was seriously wrong. It meant this wasn't just teenage dramatics after all. "Is she going to be okay?" Mrs. Patterson asked, moving closer to my bedside. "If it is appendicitis and we catch it before it ruptures, she'll be fine. It's a very common procedure, but we need to move quickly." "Doctor." Martinez turned to me. "Nick, we really need to reach your parents. Surgery requires parental consent." I felt panic rising in my chest. "They're at the Symphony Center. They turned off their phones for the concert. I don't know how to reach them." "What time does the concert end?" the nurse asked. "My mom said they'd be home around midnight, but they always go to dinner afterward when it's an important event, and this is really important to my dad's work." I trailed off, realizing how pathetic that sounded. Dr. Martinez and the nurse exchanged a look. "That's potentially another 4 hours, he said quietly. "Nick, if your appendix ruptures, you could develop sepsis. That's life-threatening." Mrs. Patterson stepped forward. "Doctor, what are our options here? This child is in agony and her parents are unreachable. We can try to reach them through the Symphony Center's management. They might be able to get a message to them during intermission. In extreme circumstances, we can proceed with emergency surgery if the child's life is in immediate danger, but we prefer to have parental consent." A technician arrived to take me for the CT scan. The journey through the hospital corridors was surreal, lying on a gurney, staring up at ceiling tiles while strangers discussed my fate. The CT scan itself was quick but uncomfortable, the contrast dye making me feel nauseous on top of everything else. When I returned to the emergency room, Dr. Martinez was waiting with my results. "Nick, the scan confirms what we suspected. You have acute appendicitis, and your appendix is quite inflamed. We need to operate tonight. The good news is that it hasn't ruptured yet, but we can't wait much longer." Mrs. Patterson squeezed my hand. "Have you been able to reach her parents?" The Symphony Center tried paging them during intermission, but they didn't respond. It's possible they stepped out or couldn't hear the announcement. I felt tears burning my eyes. Even faced with my need for emergency surgery, my parents couldn't be bothered to check their messages. The charity concert was more important than their daughter's life. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We're going to try one more time to reach your parents. If we can't, and if your condition continues to deteriorate, we'll have to proceed with emergency surgery. I've already called in Dr. Sarah Kim. She's one of our best surgeons." A woman in surgical scrubs appeared beside my bed. She was Asian American, probably in her 40s, with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately made me feel safer. "Hi, Nick. I'm Dr. Kim. I understand you're having quite a night." "That's one way to put it," I said, attempting a weak smile. "I've looked at your scans and Dr. Martinez is right. We need to get that appendix out tonight. I know this is scary, especially without your parents here, but I want you to know that this is a very routine procedure. I've done hundreds of them, and you're going to be just fine. What if something goes wrong?" "Nothing's going to go wrong," she said firmly. "But I want you to know that you have people here who care about you." She nodded toward the Pattersons, who had been allowed to stay, despite not being family. "And our entire team is going to take excellent care of you." The anesthesiologist arrived to explain the procedure, and a nurse began prepping me for surgery. They'd given me something for pain that made everything feel slightly dreamlike, but I was still conscious enough to feel the weight of the situation. "Mrs. Patterson," I called out as they prepared to wheel me into the operating room. "Yes, honey? Will you please stay? Just until it's over?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Of course, sweetheart. Bob and I will be right here waiting for you. And if my parents show up, if your parents show up, we'll tell them exactly what happened and how brave you've been," she said firmly. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I caught sight of the clock on the wall. 11:47 p.m. My parents' concert would be ending soon, but they still had their post-show dinner plans. They had no idea their daughter was about to undergo emergency surgery, and honestly, I wasn't sure they would have cared if they did know. But as the anesthesia mask went over my face and Dr. Kim's reassuring voice told me to count backward from 10, I realized something important. I wasn't alone. I had people who cared about me, who had dropped everything to help me when I needed it most. They just weren't the people I'd expected them to be. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took hold was the sound of machines beeping steadily, the murmur of medical professionals who were about to save my life, and the overwhelming realization that sometimes family isn't about blood relations. It's about who shows up when you need them most. I woke up in a hospital room filled with pale morning light, my throat dry and my abdomen tender but no longer screaming with pain. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then it all came flooding back. The concert, the pain, my parents hanging up on me, the Pattersons, the surgery. "Well, look who's awake," a familiar voice said softly. Mrs. Patterson was sitting in the chair beside my bed, looking rumpled and tired but smiling warmly at me. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Like I got hit by a truck," I croaked, then managed a small smile. "But better than last night. Did you stay here all night?" Bob and I took turns. He's down in the cafeteria getting coffee. She reached over and smoothed my hair back from my forehead. "Dr. Kim said the surgery went perfectly. Your appendix was quite inflamed, but they got it out before it ruptured. You're going to be just fine." I looked around the room, taking in the standard hospital decor, the IV pole beside my bed, the monitors beeping quietly. "What time is it?" "Almost 9 in the morning." 9 in the morning. My parents should have been home hours ago. "Have you heard from my parents?" Mrs. Patterson's expression grew carefully neutral. "They arrived about an hour ago. They're speaking with Dr. Kim right now." Even through my post-surgical haze, I could read between the lines. My parents had finally shown up, and they weren't happy about the situation. Probably not happy about having their evening cut short by emergency phone calls, not happy about having to deal with hospital administrators, and definitely not happy about having their neighbors involved in what they'd consider a private family matter. Are they angry? "Honey, that's not for you to worry about right now. You just had surgery. Your job is to rest and recover." But I could see it in her eyes. Yes, they were angry. Probably furious, actually. And somehow, I was sure that anger would be directed at me rather than at themselves for being unreachable during a medical emergency. The door opened and my parents walked in, followed by Dr. Kim. Dad was still wearing his tuxedo from the night before, though his bow tie was undone and hanging loose around his neck. Mom had removed her jewelry and pulled her hair back into a messy ponytail, but she was still in her evening gown. They both looked exhausted and stressed. "Nick," Mom said, rushing to my bedside. "Oh, honey, are you okay? We came as soon as we got the message." "When did you get the message?" Dad cleared his throat. "The hotel called our room around 3 a.m. We'd stayed downtown for the night because of the snow." Of course they had. They'd probably booked a suite at the Palmer House or the Ritz-Carlton, made a romantic evening of it after their important social event. While I was having emergency surgery, they were probably ordering room service champagne and congratulating themselves on a successful night of networking. "Mr. and Mrs. Montenegro," Dr. Kim interjected, "I'd like to discuss Nick's procedure and recovery plan with you." She explained everything in detail, how inflamed my appendix had been, how close I'd come to rupture, the minimally invasive technique they'd used, the expected recovery time. My parents nodded and asked appropriate questions, playing the role of concerned parents perfectly. "And I have to commend your neighbors," Dr. Kim continued, nodding toward Mrs. Patterson. "They potentially saved Nick's life by bringing her in when they did. If she'd waited until morning, we might have been dealing with a ruptured appendix and sepsis." I saw Dad's jaw tighten slightly. He didn't like being lectured, especially not in front of witnesses. "We're very grateful," Mom said smoothly. "Eleanor, Bob, we can't thank you enough for taking care of our daughter." Mrs. Patterson stood up, gathering her purse and coat. "She's a wonderful girl. You should be very proud of her. She was incredibly brave through all of this." After the Pattersons left and Dr. Kim finished her discharge instructions, my parents and I were finally alone. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken tensions. "Nick," Dad finally said, sitting down in the chair Mrs. Patterson had vacated. "We need to talk about what happened last night." Here it comes, I thought. The lecture about how I'd embarrassed them, how I'd overreacted, how I'd involved the neighbors in private family business. "You went to the Pattersons' house after we specifically told you not to bother the neighbors," Mom said, her voice carefully controlled. "Do you have any idea how that looks? Having our 16-year-old daughter show up at their door in the middle of the night because we were supposedly unreachable? I had appendicitis," I said quietly. "I could have died." "You could have waited until morning," Dad said. "Emergency rooms see teenagers with stomach pain every night. Most of the time, it's nothing serious." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Dr. Kim said if I'd waited until morning, my appendix might have ruptured. Doctors always say that." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "It's called covering their liability. The point is, Nick, you made a decision that reflected poorly on our family. The Pattersons are probably telling everyone in the neighborhood that we're neglectful parents." Something broke inside me at that moment. Maybe it was the residual anesthesia lowering my inhibitions, or maybe it was the stark contrast between my parents' reaction and the genuine care I'd received from virtual strangers, but I found myself saying words I'd never had the courage to say before. "Maybe because you are." The room went dead silent. Dad's face flushed red and Mom's mouth opened in shock. "What did you just say to us?" Dad's voice was dangerously quiet. "I said maybe you are neglectful parents. I called you when I was in agony and you hung up on me. You chose a concert over your daughter's medical emergency. I had to have surgery and you weren't even reachable." Mrs. Patterson, who barely knows me, showed more concern for my well-being in one night than you've shown in years. "That is enough," Mom snapped. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Do you think we wanted to miss the rest of our evening? Do you think we enjoyed getting woken up at 3 in the morning and having to rush to a hospital? We work hard to provide for you, to give you opportunities, to give me what?" I interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. "A big house that feels empty? Designer clothes I didn't ask for? The privilege of being ignored whenever something more important comes up? You're being ungrateful and dramatic," Dad said, standing up, abruptly. "And frankly, Nick, this attitude is exactly why we sometimes question whether you're really sick or just looking for attention. Even after surgery? Even after they cut out my appendix? I'm still just looking for attention?" They didn't answer that question, and their silence said everything. Over the next few days, as I recovered at home, I had a lot of time to think. My parents played the role of concerned caregivers perfectly when others were watching, bringing me soup, fluffing my pillows, posting about my successful surgery on social media. But when we were alone, the underlying resentment was clear. I'd embarrass them, inconvenience them, and force them to confront some uncomfortable truths about their priorities. Mrs. Patterson stopped by every day to check on me, bringing homemade cookies and offering to help with my homework. She never mentioned my parents' behavior that night, but she didn't need to. Her kindness spoke volumes about what real care looked like. Now, 9 years later, I'm 25 years old and living in my own apartment across town. I have a good job, wonderful friends, and a boyfriend who would drop everything if I called him in the middle of the night with an emergency. I've built my own chosen family. People who show up, who listen, who care about my well-being more than their social calendar. My relationship with my parents is polite but distant. We exchange holiday gifts and birthday phone calls, but we've never talked about that night again. I think, in their minds, they've rewritten the story. I was a dramatic teenager who caused unnecessary panic, and they were responsible parents who handled a minor medical situation appropriately. But I know the truth. That night taught me the difference between people who love you and people who show up for you. It taught me that family isn't always biological, and that sometimes the people who care about you most are the ones who choose to be there when they don't have to be. Every February, around the anniversary of my surgery, I send Mrs. Patterson flowers. The card always says the same thing. Thank you for showing me what real family looks like. She's in her 70s now, but she still calls me every few months to check in, to see how I'm doing, to remind me that I have people who care about me. And I've learned to listen to my body, to trust my instincts, and to never apologize for asking for help when I need it. Because that night, when I was 16 and scared and in pain, I learned the most important lesson of my life. You deserve to be heard, you deserve to be cared for, and you never have to accept less than that from anyone, not even the people who are supposed to love you most.